Advantage of
Awesome.
me.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. And I appreciate your time. Um, Today, we're going to talk about how to hack communication, basically. It's really easy, whether we're in sales or we're in people development or wherever we are. We always need to be able to connect with other people, even if it's just our family. And so the goal here today is to give you a principle that I think is the bedrock of all good connection, and to give you some tools to put in your pocket to be able to understand how to connect with those people more effectively. A little bit about me. I'm Joe LeClaire, and I've been in the automotive industry on the software as a service side for the last 12 and a half years. I've been training and coaching, leading small groups, building out leaders for most of my professional life. I live in the Atlanta area, halfway between Atlanta and Athens, which means I live in Bulldog country. Go Dogs. Uh, and I've been married about 16 plus years now, 4 kids, and now we have 31 animals in our on our property. So it's when I say I live in a zoo, I mean it. Like I do. I live in a zoo. I should charge admission. So today, what we're going to talk about, and welcome Sarah. Thank you for joining. Today, we're talking about instantly connecting with others so that we can increase our influence. And so I'm going to define connection before we move any further. And connection is the ability to communicate with others in such a way that it increases your influence in every situation. And that's something that John Maxwell says in his book, Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. And we're going to spend a lot of time today most of our time today, talking about the science of behavioral analysis. And the reason is because I think it is one of the most effective ways to connect with someone and understand someone in a very short amount of time. And the reason that I'm using this particular quote is because the Maxwell method of behavioral analysis, we call it the Maxwell method of DISC, really is focused on this idea of creating connections with people so that we can communicate in ways that increase our influence with them. And so in John Maxwell's book, Everyone Communicates, Few Connect, he gives us 5 principles of connection. And I believe these are bulletproof principles of connected communication. The most important one is the fact that it's all about others. I have always thought that I knew this. I thought that I was great at this. And then I realized in every presentation, in most of my conversations, I ended up talking about me a whole lot. And in a presentation like this, yes, I'm talking about me because I'm not going to talk about anybody else. But when you're speaking with someone specifically, the more you're talking about yourself, the less you're connecting with them. And so I still struggle with this. I'm not perfect at it, but it is the one bulletproof, I call it a bulletproof principle about communicating and connecting with others, is that it's all about the other person. In fact, I'm going to skip here, sorry. Thomas Erickson, in his book Surrounded by Idiots, he says communication happens on the listener's terms. And so connection really is about the other person. It's about the listener. And so many times it's easy for us to get caught up in this mindset that we are connecting about the other person. But what we're really doing is finding a way to talk about ourselves or our product or our solutions in relation. It's that age-old saying, like, are you actually listening to me, or are you just sitting there waiting to say your next phrase? And we get caught in that. I know I do. I know most people get caught in that trap of we're just waiting till we can handle this objection or provide a solution to this challenge, but we're not really listening to the challenge so that we can make this conversation about the person we're communicating with. So that's our bulletproof principle. It's all about others. And when we make it all about others, then we can start to take a step back from what we want to say and start to read other people. Maxwell says good leaders are readers of people. And the best way that I know to read other people is understanding specific behavioral patterns and traits. And that's where the DISC behavioral analysis solution is really useful. So when we're done today, I'm going to give away a DISC behavioral analysis So one lucky person. I'm also going to give a discount code to the other anybody else who's watching it, so that they can go and get a disc profile done at a steeply discounted rate. So when we talk about understanding behavioral patterns, we've all probably done a personality assessment of some sort, right? Enneagram. I'm a 2 and a 7, I think. MBTI, I'm an ENFP. And then DISC, I'm an ISD. So we probably all know these terms to some extent, probably all done some sort of behavioral analysis. DISC is unique in the sense that it measures not just your core behavioral traits, but also where you're operating currently and how that might be not in alignment with your core behavioral traits for whatever reason, and not good or bad. It just is what it is. And so really the thought process, though, to kind of give you a basic overview, is that everybody is built into 4 characteristics, and everybody has a level of these things, whether it's a very low level, what we call below the line, or it's a very high level above the line. Everybody falls on a scale with every one of these traits. The traits, I don't love the terms exactly, but I'm going to go through them so you kind of understand. Dominant, influencing, steady, and compliant. I'll say right now, compliant doesn't mean I do what you say. It means playing within the lines, coloring within the lines. So think of compliance insurance, not compliance like what my 2-year-old doesn't do, right? And so we find that the D's and the I's are more outgoing. The C's and the S's are more reserved. The I's and the S's are more people-oriented, whereas the D's and the C's are more task-oriented. And I'll get into this a little bit more in my next slide. Can't really go through the whole science in one 20-minute stint, but just so you kind of understand the lay of the land. The other thing that I will say about the DISC method specifically is that it is really designed around where your core is, where you are today, and that in-between self. So where are you putting yourself? Because we all flex in and outside of our normal orientation all the time. You may be someone who's not a great public speaker, but you have to do more public speaking. And so you may find that your I on the scale moves up and down based upon whatever you're doing on your day-to-day basis. So it's flexible based on environment. So what does that look like? And here's where I really think it's important to kind of, if you could take a snapshot of anything, it would be and by the way, if you're not able to view this slide, I'm going to send the slide deck out in an email, but what are the motivators or behavioral tendencies of the different traits? And then what are the greatest fears of each of those traits? And so the 4 traits are dominant, influence, steadiness, and compliance. And so dominance, that's probably a pretty easy one. They're the type of people who seek control. They're great decision makers. They're great at being direct, and they're very results oriented. Now, you may think, well, I'm not naturally that way, but in my job, I have to be that way. And that is exactly the point of DISC, is that you may not naturally be wired that way, but you may be flexing that part of your emotional or behavioral, being, if you will, because that's what's needed for the specific environment. So a D is someone who is very decisive, very direct, great ability to take control and take charge when needed, and sometimes not when needed. And their greatest fear often is being taken advantage of. And that's really important to note for a high D, because they can be really sensitive to that feeling like you're taking advantage of them. And it can create a specific response that seems out of character because they seem pretty nice, and then they all of a sudden shut down, or they all of a sudden get kind of heightened because that has been triggered in some way. I's, on the other hand, they tend to be the ones who are persuasive. They tend to be spontaneous, generally very friendly, and they love the spotlight. So you could probably tell which one I am. So these are the people who love to be on stage. They have no problem standing up on stage, holding a microphone, talking about absolutely nothing for as long as is needed, right? These are the ones who are really great at stalling. They're the ones who can just jump right in and spout off a bunch of nonsense. Sarah and I were actually just at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and there was a congressman, or I'm sorry, a state representative who's definitely a high I on that stage. And you can kind of tell an I is probably the easiest one to tell right off the bat. And their greatest fear is rejection or loss of approval, right? Somebody who's going to be on stage, they're going to want that approval. They're going to feel rejection a lot quicker and for a lot less. S's tend to be more team oriented. So when you think of steady, right, we thought of dominant, we think of someone who is decisive, direct. We think of an I as influencer, think of YouTube personality, that kind of thing. An S is more steady. They're team oriented. They're really good at follow through. The biggest quality I think of an S is loyalty. So S's tend to be very loyal individuals. They also are very accepting. They tend to be less judgmental of others. And because of that, they tend to need acceptance. And so when they feel confronted, or if they feel like their security is threatened, they're going to kind of, that's going to be a fear that triggers for them. If they feel, a great example of an S is when you call someone into your office and they always feel like they're in trouble, right? That's someone who is a high S mentality. They're always kind of worried about that undercurrent of this is it, the hammer is about to drop. S is my second highest, and so I identify with this really, really well. And then the final one, they call it compliance. C, they call it compliance, and I don't love that word, because compliant usually means I'll do what you say. And I am married to a high C, and that is not correct. Compliant means you like to color within the lines. It means that you're more analytical. You're really good at planning things, and you pride yourself on accuracy or being right. And what's really important to note, again, like I said before, and for those of you who've joined a little later, these things operate on a scale, right? So we're all somewhat dominant. We're all somewhat influencing. We're all somewhat steady. We're all somewhat compliant. The level at which those things exist in and of our behavioral patterns is flexible, but also is what makes up our core personality style. The greatest fear of somebody who basically their goal in life is to be right all the time is obviously going to be criticism. And so, like I said before, understanding the primary motivators and the primary fears of people within these different kind of behavioral patterns really gives us an ability to speak to those people according to the way that they're wired. That's really the benefit of understanding not just your own personality style, but being able to identify the styles in other people, is being able to communicate with them according to the way that they're wired. So just a quick recap. If you're a D, that means you're decisive. It's the dominance trait. You're decisive. You're good at controlling. You're good at managing. You're direct. You're results oriented. And your greatest fear is being taken advantage of. The things that Ds probably tend to run into, though, is that they may be overbearing, or they may not have that concern for other people's feelings. And they may even get kind of belligerent when their authority is being questioned, right? On the I side, influencing, they're persuasive, spontaneous, they're friendly, they love to be in the spotlight, they love it to be about them. They hate feeling like people don't like them or feeling like people don't want them around. They can also, tend to come off a little inauthentic or phony, because they are so motivated by being approved by others. So oftentimes they don't come across as very genuine. Steady S's love to be a part of a team. They're the dependable ones. They're the ones you can call, say, hey, I need X, Y, and Z, and they're going to do whatever they need to do to make X, Y, and Z happen. But they tend to be insecure about things, and that's pretty normal. And we've all, like I said, we've all got a little bit of this in us. And then again, those C's, they like to color inside the lines. They love to plan. They love to be right. And they have a hard time when they've put a lot of thought and effort into something being criticized about that thing that they've thought so much about. You can be 100% positive that if a C comes to you with anything, they have put a lot more thought and time into it than you could even possibly imagine, unless you're also a C. So that's our number one tool, is how do we understand the basics of behavioral analysis? Again, that's not necessarily something you'll be able to do right off the bat. But I am going to show you just a quick couple of tools to be able to identify this, one, in yourself if you've never thought about it, but two, potentially icebreakers for you to identify it in other people. So the second tool I'm talking about, the first tool obviously was actually understanding behavior. The second and third tool about identifying those behaviors in others. The first one here is the elevator pitch. And it just goes something like this. There's two types of people in the elevator. There's the types of people who strike up a conversation, and there's the type of people who don't, right? The type of people who would love to talk to you about their day, their weekend, their morning, how great their espresso was from the coffee shop, and the type of people who stare at the ceiling, right? Those are the two types of people in elevators. You can be pretty well assured that if you have the type of person who's this in the elevator, they're smiling, they're talking, they're enjoying their time, they're going to be on the more outgoing side. So they're going to have some higher D&I energy. The folks who are staring at the ceiling, kind of like trying to create a personal space bubble, they're on the more reserved side. And what I like about DISC is we're not talking about extroversion or introversion. Just a side note. Extroversion and introversion, how you get your energy, has nothing to do necessarily with your overall behavioral patterns. Lots of outgoing people are introverts, and lots of reserved people are extroverts. It just doesn't necessarily move in this realm. That's just how you get your energy, right? Are more outgoing people extroverts? Well, probably. Are more reserved people introverts? Yes, but it's not mutually exclusive from that side. So the elevator pitch, you can even bring this up in conversation. Hey, I was on the elevator the other day. Depending on your behavioral pattern, you might say, I was on the elevator the other day, and the stranger got on the elevator with me and started striking up a conversation. And I got to tell you, I hate it when that happens. I love it when that happens, right? And that will draw out in them the ability to respond, or you might even make it about them and say, hey, how do you feel about, getting into elevators with strangers? Open that conversation. You're going to get a lot more out of that person than you might realize just by hearing them say, oh, I hate getting on the elevator with other people, or, oh, I love being on the elevator with people. It's a great way to make new friends, So then the third tool and final tool here is vacation preparation. How do you get ready for vacation? If you are like me, you're not the one making the list of all the things that need to be packed. You're not the one, but the person who is doing that, they're making the list of all the things that need to be packed. They're making sure there's gas in the car to get to the airport. They're making sure the itinerary is printed, or at least in your Apple Wallet. Whatever it is, they've triple checked, quadruple checked the list, and they know this is the person you can depend on, that if you're going somewhere, everything's going to be handled. For us, for my family, that is my wife. She is amazing at this. Every time we camp a lot, every time we go camping, she's got a perfect list of everything that needs to be packed, everything that needs to be done before we get on the road. And so that kind of person, they're going to be on the more task-oriented side. Doesn't mean they're not outgoing. It doesn't mean they're not reserved. It just means they're more task-oriented. People like lists, right? Doesn't mean you won't like lists, even if you're not task-oriented. It just means that the people who really like lists, those are going to be on the more task-oriented side. The people like me that are thinking about the Mai Tais or the parasailing or the kite surfing or whatever it is, the time on the beach, basically dreaming about summer, those are the people that are going to be maybe on the more people-oriented side. Think about when you go on vacation, where do you fall? And you can, this is yet again another great conversation starter. Oh man, you going on, what was your last great vacation? Are you more the kind of person who likes to make sure you're ready? Do you have to make sure the list is checked before you can enjoy yourself? Or are you more about, just getting out there? And it doesn't mean that either one can't do either, right? I'm good at planning vacations because my motivation is I want to have a lot of fun. my wife can have a lot of fun on a vacation because she's planned a lot for it. So we flex in this, and that's I think the main thing is that none of this is concrete, because people aren't concrete. We're not simple here, there, and that. We operate on a scale every day of our lives. But it's a really good way, these three tools, understanding the behaviors, and then being able to identify whether someone is people oriented or task oriented or outgoing or reserved, is just a fantastic way to make sure that you are reading people effectively. Like I said, John Maxwell says, great leaders are readers of people. If you've just joined, fear not. I am recording this and I'll send out a link to everybody at the end. But I'm going to go ahead and we're going to talk about what's next. Okay. So there's going to be some next steps that I would encourage anybody to take. One of those next steps is to look up the book. I'm going to actually put it in my email. I'll put a link to it. Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. This is a great book that talks about the 5 principles and practices that anyone can employ to move from just being someone who talks to someone who connects with others, someone who is increasing their influence in every situation. The other thing that I would encourage you to do is to take the DISC assessment. This assessment, again, is really based upon, yes, telling you how you're wired for sure, but also telling you how you can identify other people's wiring, like we did today, and how you can connect most effectively with them based upon the way that you're both wired. So this QR code that I put up, that is a link to take the DISC assessment at a discount. And so typically those DISC assessments, the Maxwell DISC assessment specifically, is $75 per person. If you scan this QR code, it's going to take you straight to a checkout booth where you can actually get that assessment at a discounted rate of $40 per person. Now, the fun part is, I'm just going to check really quick. I've got Paul, Sarah, and John was on here, and Stephen on here. So what I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and give away one of these DISC assessments for free, but it also comes with a 30-minute debrief session where we'll kind of walk through the assessment. I'll walk you through the different aspects of the report, with the highlights, where your challenges might be, and answer questions that you might have about the report. And so that is $195 value, as I think I said on my little video. So I'm excited to give one of those away. And so to do that, I've got this cool little thing called the webinar wheel, or the wheel of names. It's like just a little random website thing. I plug in your names. And so I've got the 4 people who are here. And we're going to run this, and that'll tell us who the winner is. So here we go. Drum roll, please. Oh, there's even a cool little sound. All right. My man, Steven, you've got a link coming your way. Congratulations. Like I said, you guys who are not winners, that's okay. We're all winners, because you can, where'd it go? You can download that as soon as I remember where I put it. You can download it using that QR code, which I'm going to put back up really quick right now. Maybe. There we go. Okay, and with that, you guys, I know that was a lot of information in a pretty short amount of time. Does anybody want to ask any questions? You can chat in questions. You can unmute yourself and ask questions. If you need to go, we are at, sorry, we started a little late, so we're at 2:34, but if you'd like to ask questions, please feel free to do so. I can re-go over anything if anybody joined a little late and feel like they missed something. But I want to honor your time. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. And we're wrapped up unless you guys have questions or comments or any of that. Sweet. All right. Well, hopefully everybody got time to scan the QR code. If not, don't worry. The email that I'm going to send out will have the link to this recording, as well as a link to the slide deck, so you guys can review it. And again, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time with me today. And I really hope that you found value in it. And thanks so much. Please feel free to reach out to me with anything you've got.